In this video, I'll be talking you through a reacting mass calculation from a GCSE paper. The question is shown on the screen. In this question, we're talking about the reaction between gold and chlorine to make gold chloride. And you can see they've given you the balanced equation for the reaction, in which 2 moles of gold react with 3 moles of chlorine to make 2 moles of our gold chloride. So when you get a question like this, I always recommend writing the numbers in place on the formula to start with to gather your ideas. So we know that we've got 0.175 grams of gold. So we can write that there. Okay, and we are asked to calculate the mass of chlorine needed. Okay, so this is the one we need to find out. So we're looking at the gold and the chlorine, and we don't need to worry about gold chloride because that is not involved in the question. They've also given us relative atomic masses for chlorine and gold. So as part of this question, we'll be expected to work out the formula masses for the chemicals we are using. So the formula mass of gold is simply 197. MR of gold is 197. And then the MR of Cl2 is 35.5 times 2, because there are 2 chlorine atoms, so that gives us 71. So we'll need those MRs later on in the question. Now, back to the reacting mass calculation. In a reacting mass calculation, I recommend using the 3-step method, moles, ratio, mass. So we start off by working out the moles of the chemical which we already know the mass of. In this case, that is gold. So we're going to work out the moles of gold using moles equals mass over MR. The mass from the question, 0.175 grams, divided by the MR, 197, which we've just worked out. So we just put that on the calculator. Oh, try again. And that gives us 8.88 times 10 to the minus 4 moles. Okay, so we know the moles of gold that we have at the start of the question. The next step is the ratio, and this is where you look at the balancing numbers for your chemical equation. And in this case, the ratio of gold to chlorine is, from the balancing numbers, 2 to 3. So every 2 moles of gold will need 3 moles of chlorine to react with it. So what we need to do is we need to apply that ratio to the number of moles of gold to work out the moles of chlorine. So in order to do that, we take our moles of, so we're working out now the moles of chlorine. It's going to be 8.88 times 10 to the minus 4, that's the moles of gold, times 3 over 2. We're using this ratio to work out the moles of chlorine. So that gives us 1.33 times 10 to the minus 3 moles of chlorine. The final step then is to work out the mass of chlorine. So moles, ratio, mass. So the mass of chlorine is going to be, we need to rearrange this formula here. Moles equals mass over MR, so mass equals moles times MR. We get our moles from our previous stage, 1.33 times 10 to the minus 3, and our MR we worked out at the beginning was 71. So that gives us 0.0946 grams. However, the question, if we look back at the question carefully, it says give your answer in milligrams. So our answer for this from this calculation is in grams. We need to convert to milligrams, which means timesing by 1,000. So our final step is to do our mass in grams times by 1,000, which is, of course, 94.6 milligrams.